Hi everybody. I have been busy at work here creating some really fun designs for doing embroidery on paper. I don't know if you remember when we were all in grade school, we had those little thick cardboard cards with shoelaces and we would stitch things together. And think of this as the adult version of that. There's a certain kind of simplicity to doing this, but it's incredibly relaxing and fun to do. And then the end result is you might have a card to give away to somebody that you've made yourself, and you kind of got two things out of it. You got to enjoy making it, and then you get to pass it on to somebody. So what I've designed are several kits, and each kit comes with two versions of a card design in two sizes. So 4 cards per kit, but the way that you use them means that you could make numerous designs out of them. So I'm going to show you the designs, and then I'm going to show you some samples of how they work and let you decide if this is for you. This first design I call rings, and it's just a simple circular design, but you can have it with an outline going around it or without. And then of course you can also have it, and it all comes together with 2 sizes. So I also have the note card size without the outline, and I put that on there hopefully so you can see that design pop out. And then there it is with the outline. So you get 4 of the designs, and each design also has the card background. So it has the 5x7 card, which will cut out in a 10x7 basically with a score, and the liner that goes in the center of it is also cut out. And then you have the same thing with the note card, and I didn't cut one out of that, but it's the same thing. You get a card to go underneath this, and you get the outline for the card. So that would be a set. I have a second design called angles, and you'll notice by looking at this it looks almost the same. There's no outline. The difference is one version has the angles, and I like this because it looks a little bit like a bunting, but this one doesn't have any holes in the center, where the other one, the second design, does. So it has the full holes out, so you can have more design options that way, or a little cleaner design, or more of a flag look here. But again, you can get so incredibly creative with either one. You might use these holes to cross and make some interesting woven patterns and fill in that void, or just go across it. So there's a lot that you can do. On these 2 designs I did a very simple design just going straight across, and then I used a French knot to finish the little ends. And on this one I just used all the holes to make a little different design. And you can use them vertically or horizontally, whatever you decide. I call this one the diamond pattern, and of course we have one that's outlined and one that is not, and of course the note card sizes also, with the outline, without the outline. This design pack is kind of the classic, I think of, because it's basically just a full sheet of what I call cross-stitch design. So there's just an even spaced holes going across the whole design, or just an outline, which you could use and then put anything in the middle, a greeting or any kind of cutout that you do with your Cricut. So these also, of course, come in the note card size. This outline, I'm going to show you some samples with this one, so we'll come back to this one in just a minute on some stitching options. Okay, and our final sample is called squares, and again I'm going to use this to show you some stitching options, so that's just got a kind of a sampler going on right now. But this one is, I'll show you the note card because it's easier to see, is a full box of stitching options, and this is an outline box or square. So these are the 4 card sets that we have, and I'm going to go ahead and get started and show you how to work in Design Space, get these cut out, and then show you some fun stitches to use. Okay, so here we are in Cricut Design Space, and we're just going to come over to this left-hand side, New Project, and click that little plus sign so we can start a new project. And then we're going to go to our Upload, down here on this left column at the very bottom, click on that, and you're going to need to insert or upload your images. So go ahead and click on Upload Image, and at this point you would have already downloaded the images from craftcuriosity.com. So you're going to go to Browse, and most likely your file will be in your downloads. Now that all depends on whether or not you left it there or moved it into a project folder. So we're going to go ahead and just grab a file. Let's just do that cross stitch file, and I'm going to open that, and you should see it in your upload image, and then you just click on Save. Now your most recent upload will always be this left-hand column, so just click on that. You'll see the green highlight going around it. Insert the image, and now that image is on your design board. So the very first thing that you should check is your image. If you come up at the middle of the screen right here where it says size, first of all it should remain locked, and your size should be 10 by 10. If for some reason it does not upload at 10 by 10, go ahead and just change your width. Here, I'll show you. If it was 1, it would shrink down to nothing. And if it's 10, it would go back to the size it's supposed to be. So make sure it's 10 on the width specifically. Now, if you come over here to the right-hand column, we have a little bit of work we're going to do over here. The first thing is, right now everything is in one giant group. So while everything is highlighted, if you click on that top line, it will highlight all of this. Click Ungroup, and now you should have 2 groups. And I can close those down. You can see we have everything in 2 groups. Each card set is now a group. So the reddish colors, reds and oranges and yellows, are your 5 by 7. And if you scroll down, I wish this all would stay showing on one size or one screen. So if you scroll down a little bit, you see the greens, limes, and bright yellows. That's your note card size. So those are just 2 different groups. Now we're going to just go in and set up each group. So right now I'm going to click, see these little eyeballs? I'm going to click on the bottom one and get rid of my larger card for a minute. So we're going to go to this upper group where we still have our eyeball lit up, and we're going to open that up. And for a minute now we're going to ungroup all of that. Now we're going to do a couple of changes to some of the cards here to set it up properly. If you come down to the bottom, where it says embroidery card, just highlight that for a minute. Notice that there's a large rectangle, and then right above it it says cut, but there's nothing really there. I want you to just click that line, and you're going to come over here to line type. We have to change that to a score. That's the line that goes down the center of the card, and we don't want to cut that, we want to score. So just drop that line type down, click on score, and then right above that score line, come back up and just tap on the line that says embroidery card that collects the rectangle and the score line. We want to grab that whole group, and then I want you to just click on attach. Okay, that card is set up. Next we're going to do the same thing with this second card. This is the inner card. So I want to go back to the cut line for that one, and I want to change that to score also. I want to highlight the embroidery card and attach. Okay, that's done. And then I'm just going to take this green card, and I just like this for visual sake. I'm going to drag it up to the top because I want to see everything. Now, I'm sorry because the screen is just not letting you see it all, but there's everything. Now I want to just grab all of that. So click and drag so you get a rectangle. See this blue rectangle around all of it? I've selected everything. I'm just going to regroup it. Okay, that one is set up. We're going to do the same exact steps now on the larger card. So I'm going to turn off that eyeball, turn back on the one below, and so now you can see that we're working with the reds and oranges colored card. That's your 5 by 7. So we're going to do the same thing. I want to, first of all, everything's a group right now, so I need to ungroup it. Now I just have 2 I have an outer card and an inner card liner, and I need to change the center lines on both of those to score instead of cut. So I'm going to come down to the very bottom group here, this group. I'm going to come up and you see the rectangle and you see the word cut with nothing showing. Highlight just that one line. Go all the way up here to the left again. Click on the drop-down menu and select Score. Right above that score line now, I'm back on the right. Click on that and it highlights the card and the line and attach those together. Now we're going to do the same thing for the liner. And the reason you can't see it, I should mention, is because this thing jumped up to the top, so it basically arranged itself to go on top of everything. So it's okay, you can't see this one, but you're actually doing the work. So come down to the bottom here again, select just the cut line, come to the line type on the left up here, drop down menu, hit score. Above that score line, I'm back on the right now, click above it and click attach. And isn't that funny, it drops to the front again. And then see how this red card where it has all the little holes to cut out is down at the bottom? We're just going to click and drag that one to the top. Again, just so visually you can see all three pieces. We're going to select them all and regroup them. And now everything is set exactly the way I want it. So I have the red card, the green card. I'm going to put my green card on top so you can see it. Everything's ready, and if you wanted to cut out every piece, you would do that. If you didn't want to cut out every piece, so for example, let me do it on the green card. For example, my green card, the note card size, I actually have note cards, so I only need the card front. So I could actually turn off the inner and outer cards and just have that green card, and I could hide the red card too. Let's do that. And I could just cut out that card front. My Cricut's only going to cut what it sees on the screen. So let's go ahead and open those all back up and just set it to cut everything. I think we got it all. Yep, we did. Okay. Now that you've done all this work to set it up, click on Save and save this. So I'm going to save it as Embroidery Cards Cross Stitch and click on Save. Once you do that, it is now saved to the cloud with all those settings fixed, and you won't have to do it again. So that was saved successfully. Now let's go make it. Now in here is where you'll just set up whatever you have. For example, if you're cutting out everything on 12 by 12, that's great. That's what it automatically goes to. But if you're cutting it out on a different size, say 8.5 by 11, then for each color, you would have to come and change your mat. So you just go down the line. And you can look really quickly and see that now that mat, you can see that the paper doesn't cover it all. And you can go scroll down and see that these are set for 12 by 12. So you just would go down and make the adjustment. I'm not going to go and adjust everything. Once you've figured out your paper, click on Continue. Then you would select what you're working on, and I typically am working on a medium cardstock, so I'll select that. Now in Tools, mine is set up with a scoring wheel, but if you're working in the Explorer, it would be the scoring pen, the stylus I should call it. And I could use a stylus as well with my Maker because I have the choice. So if you need to change your tool, then you can just come in here on Tool Options. We're going to use a fine point blade and a scoring stylus and apply. And then from here, you just go to the machine. You load your mat and you cut. Okay, so after you get your card off your Cricut, I have one little sample here because I went and cut out a bunch of these. Most of the time the holes all pop out really nicely, but sometimes they don't. My blade is a little bit old, so I think that's why it's doing that. But I found that if I just grab some painter's tape, or washi tape works good too, and just kind of loop it around my finger, it picks up those little holes really easily. Now you don't have to go clean it out. You could just start stitching and that would pop the little any leftovers out. But you know, I like to kind of create a set and then have them in a little travel bag so I can just pull them out and embroider with them. So I kind of like them ready to go, and I don't really want to drop little dots everywhere. Anyhow, when the tape's real sticky, be careful. I just kind of roll it off the paper. But you can just kind of come in and it picks them up pretty good, pretty quick. So that's a really easy way to get rid of some of those dots. You can see that's all getting picked up on the tape. So if you have that challenge, there you go, little painter's tape. Of course, your paper may be more sensitive than mine, so make sure your whatever side you start with, you may want to make that the back in case it does tear up the paper just a little bit. Really haven't had that problem. I had it happen once when I really pressed the tape down and then tried to pull it back. Stuck a little too much. So just don't do that. Just kind of lightly, you know, you can kind of rub off some of the ones that stick up. And you can turn it over if you are brave and kind of pick up on the other side. And I find I have to keep kind of turning the tape to a newer sticky part because once it gets too many little dots on it, it won't pick up anymore. Okay, so that's a great way to just get rid of those little dots and not have them flying all over your desk. So we'll move on from here. And what I really wanted to show you was a couple of options on stitching. So now that our card's prepped and we got all the little dots removed, the way that we work with these is, I'm going to show you the back of this, is I simply taped my string into a corner and started stitching. But what I did here, this crazy jumble of strings, is I just set up 4 different lines so I could show you 4 simple border techniques and just give you a quick little stitching lesson, give you some ideas. So the first thing I have here is just a running stitch. This is the simplest of all stitches, but it's really effective. It has that stitched down, kind of homemade look that I just love. But the running stitch is a simple in and out stitch. So you just come up, I'm going to draw that string out a little bit. There we go. You just go up and then down in the next stitch, then up again. I'm going slow because I've got all these strings here and I just don't want to jumble them all up. The different option to this, well, there's 2 things you can do. This is called a running stitch. You could run it all the way down and then run it back the opposite way where you're coming up on the white spaces to have it stitched fully across. That's one way to do this. Or you could do a back stitch, make your first stitch going down, then you come up, and then instead of going forward, you actually go backward. That's called a back stitch. So that's just another little option. And you just come up to the next open space, and then you continually are going back. So there's running stitch and there's back stitch. And when you're all done with that, just turn your card over. Grab a little piece of Scotch tape or washi tape, tape that string down, and then cut it off. Done. I've got a couple more stitches I wanted to show you. So this is just for some stitching fun. I wanted to give you a few ideas. This next stitch I have on the end is called a stem stitch. And the way this one works, you'll see that my thread's coming up here. I'm going to cross over 2 stitches. So I'm going to stitch down. Whoops, I'm sorry. Thread's coming here. I'm going to cross over that one and stitch down here. Then I'm going to kind of hold my thread to the side and bring my needle up before I pull it all the way. This is a stitch you would use in embroidery. They call it a stem stitch because it makes a nice solid line for stems of leaves and flowers, things like that. So this is just another option, the stem stitch. There's a million options. I just thought I'd take a minute to share 4 of them with you. And well, 5 when I include the back stitch one. So that's a stem stitch. Now let's turn the corner here. And this blue thread, I'm going to show you how to do a chain stitch. This one's really fun. If you look at it closely, it's very lifted. It's just a running chain across the card. And this one, you actually, your thread will be coming out from your last stitch. You're going to actually stitch into the same hole inside of that loop, stitch down, and now you're going to bring your needle back up in the next hole inside of your loop. That's what makes the chain. Now when I bring mine down and tighten it, I don't over tighten it. I like it kind of full and loose so you can see it. So I just kind of bring my yarn forward, and that yarn, my string, my embroidery floss forward, and then you just do it again. So go inside that loop, bring your yarn down, and then you bring your yarn up inside the new loop into the next hole. And then when you tighten it, I kind of bring my yarn forward as I tighten. So we'll do it again. That is a chain stitch. It's a fun stitch, huh? I like it. Now at the very end of it, when you get to the last chain, what you do is instead of going inside of the loop, you go on the outside of the loop, but back down that hole. And that will hold your last chain. There you go. This last stitch is called a blanket stitch, and it's a stitch that goes on the outside of the, kind of wraps it really. If you look at both sides, it's just neatly wrapped with the stitch kind of running along the outside. That stitch you would do, let's get that unfiddled here, you would do by stitching through the top and bringing your needle through the loop as you create it. And then just snugging it down and then doing the same thing in the next hole. So you can even reach right into in between the thread there. And that's a really fun finish as well. And you could do that going all the way around. In fact, when you get to a corner, you might do your blanket stitch and then even a second stitch, a third, or a fourth. And these holes will take that. You can put more than one stitch through a hole. By the way, the needles that I'm using are a DMC embroidery needle size 22. The holes that I've set up on these cutouts, that is the perfect needle size because it will go through. It'll bring a full 6-strand DMC floss through, and it doesn't enlarge the hole at all. So it just goes through nicely. Now you don't have to use all 6 strands. You could do less than that. You can do half. You could do, I think 1 might be too thin, but 2, 3, or 4, or 5, or 6. You know, if you're going to go 5, you would just go 6, right? So there's just some simple stitches. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is this sampler of stitches because again, there's so many options that you can choose to do. And look at how many different looks I achieved using the same pattern. And that's what's so much fun about these. You can get immensely creative with it. So what I'm going to do is I've got just 3 strands of the DMC floss on my size 22 needle. And I'm just going to flip this over, hold that down, and stick your tape down. If you do anything like what I just did, where it came over the edge, grab your scissors, just trim it off. So the first thing I did was just a really simple crossover. So I just started at my top, made a little plus sign, and then I came over halfway and crossed that over. Then I went from corner to corner, so top corner to bottom corner, then bottom corner to top corner, and then I went from side to side. and then from top to bottom. So I literally just made a bunch of crossovers. Very, very simple, but it makes a nice design, and you could just do that pattern across the whole card. You could just go on to the next square and do the same thing. So that's one pattern. The next thing I did was really simple. I just did that running stitch and went all the way around. And you can just see how quickly these are whipping up. They don't take long. Again, you can sort of get really creative with all the different things you can do, even with the same patterns. You know, you could even stitch across the patterns, where I was considering maybe using these to go across and then these to do something else going on the lines. I'm not going to show that here, but that was an option. Okay, next I did something I called think out of the box, where I literally just went at an angle, crossing over one way, and I just did all of the top ones first. And took that box and just made it an angle. And then I just went side to side, angling up. So that was fun and shifted, and you could, you know, shift your angles back and forth and give the card more movement. Okay, so this next square, I did that chain stitch that I actually already showed you on the outlines, along with that running stitch. I did that outlined card after I did this. But anyhow, the chain stitch, I just make a loop in the first hole, and then I bring up my needle inside of that loop before I tighten it. And that makes this great little chain. So to do the next chain, I'm going to go back in the same hole. That will make my loop. But I need to come up in the next hole inside of that loop and catch it. And that makes a chain. And I'm just going to run this across the bottom. This one takes a little longer to do, so I won't keep you with it. So that chain, you would just continue it all the way around. I'm not going to right now. We'll get on to the next one. But to end it, you would just come back inside of, or sorry, on the outside of the loop and lock that down. There you go, little chain stitch. And this 3-strand tends to pull through a little easily. That's, I think, why I like the 6-strand better. Okay, this next one was really fun. I did a woven stitch. So basically, I just ran 4 lines across, and I didn't start weaving until I got to the other side of this. But this was really fun, and I used this on that circle pattern on one of the cards, and I loved the effect. I just thought it was really cool, and it was kind of fun to see it develop. And I just tried to make sure I was consistent, that all of my weaving was the same. So if I started the first one with an over-under, then I wanted to do that consistently. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to come back in the same hole, and I'm going to go, we'll go under, over, under, over, under, and then I'm going to put that in that first hole. Then I'm going to come back to the second hole. Now I'm going to go over, under, over, under, over. The third one. Come on. There we go. Now we're going to go back to under, over. So just, you do the opposite each time. And this fourth one, we go, let's get that string pulled out, over, under, over, whoops, over, under, over, under, over. Put in that fourth hole. And then the fifth, and it's weird maybe to do these end pieces, but I did them anyways. So that would be an under, so we'll just go over, under, over. Maybe go under here. Under, over, under, over, under. And stitch it down. And that was really fun. I really enjoyed the woven one. This next one I did more like a string art. So what I did is I started in the top and I just came over, instead of going straight down, I came over one. And then I came down to the next one. Whoops. And I came over one. And I literally just went all the way around until I would have basically repeated that first stitch. And look how fast we're basically whipping up a whole row on this card. It does go quickly. And imagine all the different stitches you could play with and create on these cards. This first group is very geometrical. I do have plans to make some more flowing kind of patterns. So if these are popular, then those will be forthcoming. So you keep working this around. Whoops. And we're not quite done yet, even though this is touching. We still have to finish this top row and get that last bit of crossover. Alright, and this would be the last one, because if I did one more, it would be going from this top corner where we had started. So that's how I finished that one. So it looks a little bit like string art. That's kind of fun. This next line, I'm just going to do the one top line, because all I did was I stitched these straight across, but on the bottom I did a stitch, and it's really hard to even see it, but it's called couching. So couching, basically I came across the top, but then I came up in that first hole and I caught my thread and just looped over the top of it. Now I did this on one of the samples where I did straight lines going across and came back and did the couching with a second color, and that really is fun. It kind of pops. I can show that to you. It's right here. So I just did bold lines of blue and green, and then I used my yellow to come back with that couching stitch and collect that color. And you basically just come up the hole, wrap it around the thread, and back down the same hole, and then you go on to the next hole. So that was really fun, and that's this stitch. It's just not as noticeable with the same color on top. But that is couching. And then again, this last one, I'm not going to complete the whole thing, but basically I just did French knots. So a French knot, I personally think works way better with 6 strands instead of 3 strands. But I'll go ahead and do one with 3 strands. And the way I did it was, I set the card down, I took my string, I have my needle, I took the string and I wrapped it towards me, 1, 2. So you have it wrapped, and then you bring it down to the hole, and then I just kind of brought the thread over to the side and kind of held it. So you can see that little wrap around the needle. It's right there at the base, and then I'm just going to bring the thread through and made a little knot. So again, I set it down, it just works better for me. I wrap twice, I poke the needle into the hole, and I actually bring the knot down right on the top of the paper, and I just kind of hold it, And then I just bring my needle through. There you go. So that's it. These are the embroidery cards. The sets are online and available now at craftcuriosity.com. And there are great setups, 4 cards in each pack and multiple uses for each design. And I wanted to point this out too. I had mentioned that I had note cards. Well, I had a set of note cards. I think I bought it at one of the craft stores. And this is why I also made this design, or showed you where you could just cut out the top of the design. Let me use one that doesn't have stitching on it, because these will fit right on top of a note card. So you could just cut out this part and stitch it if you already have the card, or each set has both the card and an insert liner in the card. So if you're using a colored cardstock that may be too dark to write on, you can line that with a nice ivory or white color, or whatever, you know, coordinating color you want that's light enough to write on. So these are really great sets. I would love to see what you do with them. I would love to see how many different designs you come up with. And you could certainly just hashtag Craft Curiosity on Instagram and put them up, and it would be so fun to see how creative you get with these embroidery cards. And they are fun. They're relaxing and fun, and they're just an easy, lightweight craft to do.